While comics can be a great medium for addressing sensitive issues, they also have a history of hosting characters that are so offensive or insensitive that many of them have been buried by their publishers. The cultural landscape was decidedly different when the villain Egg Foo was created back in 1965. First appearing in Wonder Woman number 157, Egg Foo hit every single Asian stereotype that could possibly be attributed to an egg-shaped bad guy. His face was a straight-up copy of a wartime propaganda poster, and he spoke in an accent that was straight out of a Charlie Chan parody. Looking at the comic with today's standards, let's just say there's some colorful language we don't use anymore.
Is confusing.
It is confusing. Say your damn pronouns.
In his debut, Egg Foo was a Chinese communist agent who, for some unexplained reason, was the size of a house and shaped like an egg. He didn't have any real powers, was stuck in the ground, and actually briefly killed Wonder Woman. To make things especially weird, his mustache had the ability to whip and grab his enemies because, he was an egg without actual arms, so what else is he gonna do? Throughout his publication history, he's been retconned and reimagined, and his weird relatives and robot duplicates have shown up, even in video games, but little could be done to mask his offensive beginnings. On the surface, Snowflame is just this guy with super stamina, strength, and something called blast power, which is all because of the wonders of cocaine. Snowflame has only ever appeared in one comic, 1988's The New Guardians #2, during the height of bringing the war on drugs to kids in everything from comics to video games. So maybe a leader of a drug cartel gaining awesome superpowers from snorting cocaine wasn't the best idea.
And it sounds like the solution is more cocaine.
But hey, at least they tried. His career is incredibly short-lived once he gets thrown into an exploding shed during his first real fight. For most comic villains, this would be nothing but a flesh wound, but the drug-addled Snowflame never came back, except in really creepy fan comics. They can't all be winners. When he was first created, Marvel's Rawhide Kid was just another comic book gunslinger who faded once Space Rangers came along and people weren't as interested in westerns anymore. So he mostly sat in a drawer for decades. When Marvel finally decided to do something new with the character in 2003, they changed only one aspect of him. They made him gay. While that's not necessarily an inappropriate move on its own, apparently the only way Marvel knew how to do that was to heap just about every stereotype on the character they could think of and make wiener jokes on his first cover, and second cover, and shoehorn his entire tragic history into a single page. The most obvious alteration was his speech, which focused almost entirely on gossip, fashion, and innuendo with absolutely no subtlety.
Have you got it?
Yes.
Sounds like steam escaping.
Ultimately, it added nothing to the character since he was already well established, having been printed off and on since 1955, no new backstory, no new anything, just more offensive to make cheap gay jokes for no good reason. It's hard to say whether or not Big Bertha is a commentary on the problems within the fashion industry or the social stigma of being overweight, because Bertha is representative of both extremes. She's a mutant who can transform her body into a 600-pound superhero, but she normally looks like a skinny supermodel. Now that's all fine though, because it's not her transformation from skinny to fat that's inappropriate. Rather, it's when she changes back from big to small, when she literally pukes away the fat. Now, it should be mentioned that Big Bertha, as well as the rest of her teammates on the Great Lakes Avengers, are meant to be joke characters in the first place, but bulimia as a superpower is a screwed up message to send, and that's exactly what this character does. Even if you put a happy squirrel giving you positive messages in the corner of the page, Marvel could have done anything with her powers, but they went with the bulimic supermodel superhero idea instead. Ugh, barf. It's unlikely you've picked up a comic book and read about the misadventures of Heshe. You know, the most fiendish killer of all time? The character only ever appeared in one comic book, 1943's Boy Comics number 9. Heshe is literally half man and half woman, and somehow has the superpower of being able to stand in profile and perfectly mask one side of his/her face, which is how he/she uses her/his powers of feminine seduction or mighty man strength against unwitting enemies. In Heshe's one and only adventure, he, cons a landlady into marrying him, while his neatly placed fedora masks the villain's feminine features. When Heshe's peculiar nature is discovered by Mrs. Heshe, the bad guy goes into a blind rage and kills her, drags her downstairs, and stuffs her body into a wall. The whole adventure ends up with a trip to the electric chair after the murder is caught by Crime Buster. The reasons for this character being inappropriate are pretty clear. It's not that the character was what we'd consider to be trans today. No, it's literally half of a man and half of a woman split lengthwise and stuck together to create what the comic book writers considered to be the world's worst monster. Worse than literal monsters.
That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works.
That and the comic describes anyone even remotely similar as circus freaks. Keep it classy, boy comics. Ugh. When you look like a KKK inductee whose hood got messed up in the wash, you're off to a bad start in many, many ways. Hate Monger has been part of mainstream comics since he debuted in Fantastic Four number 21 in 1963, and his main weapon is something called a hatred ray. Can you guess what it does? Seriously, one guess. And it doesn't play Smash Mouth songs at high volume, but it has the same effect. Give up? It makes you hate stuff. When he's first encountered by the Fantastic Four, Hate Monger is giving a speech about why he should be intolerant of foreigners. The Thing doesn't like what he hears, so he smashes the guy's podium to smithereens. That's when the H-Ray comes out, and the members of the Fantastic Four immediately turn on each other. Well, more than usual. Eventually, the FF agree to continue the good fight even though they hate one another, and the whole thing comes to a hateful head when Hate Monger accidentally blasts his own goons, and they kill him. You'll never guess who's under the hood? Yep, it's Hitler. Or maybe just one of his duplicates. But the character didn't die there and then. He went on to build a supercomputer out of a bunch of old Nazi brains. His consciousness continued to transfer from one brain to another, prolonging the life of one of the worst human beings to have ever lived, eventually coming back as a being of pure energy in 2001. And even though he was made of pure light, he decided to keep the world's worst mustache.
In the DC universe, the Green Lanterns are members of an outer space police force who are armed with power rings that can turn their thoughts and willpower into solid objects made of light. With a roster that numbers over 7,200, there are plenty of weird ones, but none of them have been as troubling as Arisia. In her first appearance, Arisia is a young teenager. After she gets assigned to Earth, her crush on Hal Jordan leads her to subconsciously use the ring to reshape herself into a sexy adult body with a revealing costume. Once that was done, she was free to act on her crush, and while Hal was initially surprised, the two wound up dating for a few years and even living together. There have been plenty of hasty retcons about how she's much older in Earth years, but a teenager from outer space is still a teenager. The one thing you have to give the New Guardians is that it meant well. Unfortunately, its attempts at creating a diverse cast and dealing with the real-world issues of 1988 went bad more often than not, leading to regrettable characters like Extraño and Snowflame, the villain who worshipped cocaine. But while Extraño has been redeemed by later portrayals, and Snowflame has garnered his own sort of fan base by being one of the most insane concepts ever printed in comics, nobody's in a hurry to bring back the Hemogoblin, the AIDS vampire. His one and only appearance was New Guardians number 1, but it's one more than anyone ever wanted. In that issue, it was revealed that a white supremacist organization had created a racist vampire to fight minority heroes. The good guys were able to win by beating him to a pulp, but then it was revealed that he had AIDS, and his accelerated vampire metabolism had caused him to die of the disease by the time he was taken to a hospital. The worst part? In the fight against the heroes, he managed to infect 2 of them with the disease. At the time, even getting a mention of AIDS in a superhero comic was groundbreaking, but characterizing it as a disease spread by a blood-sucking Nazi vampire who infected the book's extremely flamboyant gay character was maybe not the best idea. It's usually pretty easy to draw a distinction between characters who are inappropriate by accident and those who most definitely cross a line on purpose. But we have to give special mention to Bueno Excelente, who fights evil with the power of perversion. This guy is the definition of inappropriate. He's a member of Section 8, a team put together by an alcoholic would-be superhero named Sixpack, whose members included weirdos like the Defenestrator, a Schwarzenegger-esque tough guy who carried around a window that he could throw people through, and Dog Welder, who, well, the name says it all in that one. He welded dogs to people. Look, it's a really weird comic. Even among them, however, Bueno Excelente stands out. His only power, such as it is to sexually assault other men, including a heavily implied encounter with Green Lantern. Amazingly, he's the only member of Section 8, besides Six-Pack, to survive a battle that wiped out the rest of the team, but his appearances are thankfully few and far between. Considering that he's a walking sexual assault joke, that's definitely for the best. Jam is the single worst character to come out of DC's 1993 Bloodlines event, and that's saying something. The story ran through 27 different comics, with the idea being that every book would introduce a brand new superhero to the DC universe. There were a couple of notable exceptions, but the vast majority of the characters were along the lines of Gunfire, the man who can turn anything into a gun. Jam appeared in Legion of Superheroes, where he literally crawled out of the garbage can to get the power to make anyone do anything he told them to. He was portrayed as an idiotic skater dude who leaned on catchphrases like calling things prodigious. The only saving grace is that everyone else in the comic found him as annoying as the readers did, making it pretty clear that we were supposed to hate this guy, not that hating him was difficult. After ordering the Legion to take him to the 31st century, he tested out his powers by ordering women to take off all their clothes. That only stopped when he tried it on a robotic duplicate of Marie Antoinette, who was unaffected and slapped him instead. Fortunately, he only made a couple of appearances, but if you're looking for him, you should probably check out that garbage can. It's where he belongs. Most inappropriate characters don't last long before someone realizes that having a sex-obsessed mind control teen or a cocaine-powered superhuman is a bad idea. Star Fox, on the other hand, has hung around for a full 5 decades, and he's even been an Avenger. On his native Titan, Star Fox is known as Eros, and as his name implies, he has the power to induce a euphoric state of pleasure in anyone around him, making them regard him as their closest friend, with benefits. There are, of course, exceptions to this. He once tried to overwhelm a rampaging Hulk in waves of pleasure and got punched into next week. But since he can't turn it off, he's basically just a walking thirst trap who frequently indulges in the results. The implications of this aren't even subtext either. In a 2005 story in She-Hulk, Star Fox was actually put on trial for multiple cases of sexual assault, and the only defense was that the women he'd slept with had wanted to. The trial never finished, and Star Fox was taken back to Titan, but considering that his own defense attorney wound up punting him right in the old moons of Saturn after realizing he'd used his powers on her back when they were both Avengers, it definitely wasn't going well. Oh, and also, he's Thanos' brother, meaning that the Mad Titan who once killed half the universe is actually not the worst member of the family.